Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, COVID, resilience, emergency management, well-being, anything that's relatable to those topics, and anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there, so I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to every message I get. And we'll see about getting you on the show or finding someone else to come on the show and talk about the topic you want us to touch on. I also would like to announce I will be speaking at the Continuity Insights Conference on October 4th to 6th this year in Minneapolis. Hopefully it's on site and we get to be face-to-face, but check out that one. And I will also be speaking at the Continuity and Resilience Today conference in Toronto, December 1st to 2nd this year. So if you're in the Toronto area, come on down and maybe we'll get you on the show. Speaking of the show, today, a lot of you know, especially longtime listeners or viewers, know that I love to read. And I read for entertainment purposes, I read for education purposes, and I've always got 2-3 books on the go. Well, today's book is the Business Continuity Operating System. What the best do differently to achieve success. And today I have the author of that book, Brian Zawada. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Nice to be here.
And this is actually your second appearance.
It is. It is my second appearance.
So some people might want to go back to some old Voice America episodes. Brian came on and chatted with us for about 15, 20 minutes, I think it was, at one of our live broadcasts at DRJ in Phoenix. And if I recall, it was quite a chuckle because every time you came over to talk, somebody called you back or something. I remember it was about
something like that
5 or 6 times before my executive producer finally snagged you and said, "Come over here." But it's good to have you on the show. Now, I know who you are. I know we've met before, and I've got people literally around the globe. Mm-hmm. Can you take a minute and tell us exactly about yourself and how you got into the industry?
Sure. Again, Brian Zawada. I have been in the industry for, I guess, upwards of 25 years now. And like many, I got into it accidentally. I was in the U.S. Air Force. I had done a lot of work around contingency planning. I was an intelligence officer and had the opportunity to do a lot of contingency planning, getting from point A to point B quickly, and when bad things happened, adjust, that type of thing. And so when I got out of the military, I kind of fell into a risk role, technology risk area, and got then accidentally into business continuity, kind of kept parlaying further into that. And before I knew it, business continuity, disaster recovery was my thing. And so I did that from a consulting perspective for a while. I did it very briefly internally in-house, went back to consulting again, eventually founded my own firm, Evolution Consulting, and then it was just about I guess it's been about 13 months ago, my firm was acquired, merged with 2 others, and Castellan Solutions was born. And so I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Castellan today.
Well, thanks very much for sharing your time. Obviously, COO, you're a busy guy, so I'm glad you've got the time for us today. I really appreciate
my pleasure.
It.
It's great to be here.
So let's jump in straight about the book.
Sure.
Over 25 years, what took so long? Why did it take so long to write a book? And what were your goals in writing it?
Yeah, I think number one, the book actually followed something a little bit different. So it was probably, I want to say it was about the 2016 timeframe when, and again, still part of Evolution, got together and thought that there are a lot of organizations that are very, very successful in this space. And then there's still others that have been challenged and still others that haven't even really gotten started formally. And so I embarked upon a bit of a research project. It wasn't a scientific research project, but it was really getting out there and talking to people. Like you, I do a lot of presentations. So I was getting out there and in a lot of these group presentations, I'd ask a few questions to the audience, and I started seeing themes and trends. And probably the biggest question I'd ask, it was just a simple 3-parter, which was, what are you struggling with? Is it struggling with getting started, designing your effort, or just keeping momentum, keeping the energy going? And we called it the kind of the 76% club, because 76% plus or minus 2, but it was always the average 76 every month, was the third, keeping momentum, staying engaged, keeping that energy level up. And so we worked to unpack that situation from, again, that's 2016, 2017, 2018 timeframe. And what was really interesting was that we started finding that organizations that started, they kind of talked a lot about, programs that ran their program like a business were very, very successful. And we said, well, let's unpack that even a little bit further. And we started figuring out that those that ran the business that had 7 core attributes in common typically achieved the best results. And then the BCOS, or the Business Continuity Operating System, was born. And we started sharing that very, very widely in February 2019. We introduced it actually at the Disaster Recovery, or the DRI International Conference in Las Vegas that year. And we started slowly. We said, I'm going to promise to roll out this book that describes this. And took a little longer than I thought, but nonetheless, it was actually good that it took a little while longer, because just like anything, any type of an invention, if you will, we made tweaks. We tested it. We made some adjustments. I was about ready to publish it again, but then Evolution was acquired. So we said, we're going to probably get some new branding here. So let's hold tight. Then COVID came. We learned a few more things. Mm-hmm. And so thankfully, we got a chance to really get this thing, what I think is getting it right. And now we've got it, out into the world. I'm really excited to share the story of the Felder Corporation and the concept of BCOS, running a program, again, with focus, with engagement, lesser focus on methodology, if you will. And we can unpack that a bit here in a moment. But, ultimately, it's great to, as of right now, getting into the hands of about 400 different people so far.
Well, it's a great book. Lots of good information in here, that's for sure. And I wish I had followed through on an email that came through after I purchased this. I could have got it for half the price from you guys. But, oh, well, that's okay. I still have it, and it sits prominently on the shelf. So now, you called it Business Continuity Operating System. Mm-hmm. We're used to the term Business Continuity Management System. Mm-hmm. Why did you change the title? Or was there a need to change the title?
Yeah, there was actually 2 influences. I'll share them in one I'll call insignificant and one that's significant. Insignificant, I thought that the words Business Continuity Management System were out there, and they were heavily tied to ISO 22301. And I thought that to avoid confusion, we needed to put a little bit of daylight between it and what we were trying to convey. The second thing is that when we thought about the label of this and the packaging of it, the idea of running the program like a business was significant. Now, I mentioned at Evolution, this is where it was originally invented. Originally, it started taking a life of its own based on our experiences with our clients and the research that we did. We also ran our company based off of something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And that way we ran Evolution, its fingerprint is all over the BCOS. And so, again, some of the attributes I'm sure we'll talk about here today very much influenced not only the inquiry when we talk to the best programs out there, but again, we saw some of those characteristics of EOS applying to BCOS, and the rest was history.
Now, you wrote this differently. The second half of the book, I'd say, would be what you would expect, talking about BCOS. But the first half is different. It's written as a fable.
Yep.
Why take that approach?
All right. Well, I'm gonna ask you a question. Actually, you mentioned at the beginning when you introduced yourself that you're an avid reader. Have you ever read any of the Patrick Lencioni books?
Patrick
Lencioni. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team would be his most popular.
Yes.
Okay. I'm a huge Patrick Lencioni fan, and he's written. Many people know of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, but I think it's 11, 12 other books.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah. And like I coach a lot of youth sports, and before my kids go to high school, I make them read The Ideal Team Player, which is a Patrick Lencioni book. And And every one of his books, 2/3, if not 3/4 of it, is a business fable, followed by a technical explanation of what the reader hopefully learned in that story. I believe storytelling is a great learning technique. And so, and at the same time, I saw a lot of books in our space that were very technical, very, methodology laden, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of great work that's been done on topics from business impact analysis to ISO 22301, so on and so forth. But I thought if I could take a fictitious organization, heavily based on many of my experiences, and walked the reader through the journey of that organization as it looked at business continuity, I thought that'd be a really good way to be able to be a little bit different. And again, I love Patrick Lencioni books and other business fables, and I thought, I'd love to be able to tell a story and hopefully allow someone to learn something from that technique.
It did work, because a lot of times I was reading sections of that fable and I'm going, God, that could be me. I remember that situation. Which leads me to my next question. Is the lead character, Mike, based on anyone in particular?
His name is based off of my oldest son, who's Taylor Michael, by the way. Oh. But and you'll find that about 80% of the characters are based on a family member or a very close acquaintance or a mentor. Even the hurricane Cooper, which is my third son, by the way, who very much is a hurricane at times, is featured prominently. But Michael's character is very much is a compilation of many of my clients. And at Evolution and at Castellan today, what we found was that we had a lot of organizations or a lot of people come to us where they were dropped the assignment of business continuity in their lap, and they didn't know where to go. Mm-hmm. And one of their first steps was, what is business continuity? And they did a Google search, and they weren't sure that there were solutions out there for them, whether it be help, whether it be software, what have you. And so Michael is a combination of a number of different people that had that same problem, that they knew a little bit, it kind of made sense to them, but they weren't exactly sure, they may have thought they were sure how to tackle it, but eventually they pivoted to looking for some help. And what I would suggest to you is that the other character that features prominently in the book, Ben, is probably more of a compilation of a little bit of me and a little bit of my colleagues at Castellan.
See, I when I read it, I thought, I wonder if Mike is Brian. But it's interesting. Ben is actually you.
Ben's a little bit more me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had it the other way around. I do like what you just said about people who had business continuity dropped in their lap, because that's exactly what happened to me 23 years ago.
Yep.
I had no idea. And that's which is probably why, especially at the beginning of this book, I was relating so much, because I could think, I went through that. Oh, yeah. I wish I knew this back then.
And I think the other, and there's a number of key characters. The other is the CFO, Andrew, also my middle kid, by the way. And Andrew is also a compilation of so many program sponsors out there, some that are very enlightened on the topic and very experienced, and others that think they have it, and they're equally open to being influenced by, making, through trial and error, making mistakes. And I think that, the relationship between Michael and Andrew is one that I've seen play out over and over and over again.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about the sponsors, and I'm going to jump into a little bit of COVID right now. With COVID, and it's been over a year and a half, it feels like, if not longer at times. Do you think that there should even still be an issue with the executive buy-in? I know we're going a little bit off topic here, but
no, it's fine. Yeah, I think I think there's two camps out there. One is they were significantly affected, impaired to a certain degree, and we're not taking it a heck of a lot more seriously. And there's still others that might have been uniquely positioned where they actually benefited from a situation such as this and saw their business actually expand with very little effort, possibly because of the way they were already they architected their business, or they were just fortunate based on the product or service that they delivered. But by and large, I think this is going to be one of those, it's gonna take a long time to escape our memories, and I think we'll be pointing to this. And by the way, it's getting worse for some people. I mean, think about all of the situations out there from a supply chain perspective that we're hearing and reading about, particularly when the supply chain has been affected not just by COVID-19, but a second event. Whether we had horrible weather in Texas combined with COVID-19 impacting the petrochemical industry that we're experiencing now. Just a wide range of different events. And supply chain, if you look at the Wall Street Journal, look at any business publication today, supply chain issues are front-page news each and every single day. I mean, I'm personally affected. If just, I ordered a Ford Bronco a while ago, and now I'm finding out that I'm not even going to get one in 2021. Ooh. And it's all because of one little part, that hard top on the, that supplier happened to have, been unable to get the equipment to be able to produce the product. So people are experiencing this personally. Businesses are experiencing it, of course, and it's going to be hard. I think from a fiduciary responsibility perspective, I think executives that fail to learn from this and take this seriously are really in jeopardy and should be called to question as to why they wouldn't take this seriously if they are affected going forward.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned your Ford Bronco. I ended up waiting 8 months for a new fridge door.
Yeah.
Because they had trouble getting some of the parts and pulling it all together, when normally I probably would have got it in 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I ended up waiting 8 months.
Yeah. And if you want a mattress today, you're in trouble, because that's the other current personal story many people are experiencing.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our first segment. Today we are talking with Brian Zawada, the author of The Business Continuity Operating System, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we are talking with Brian Zawada, author of The Business Continuity Operating System. And Brian, great first segment, lots of good information there. Now, in your book, you talk about the right way to achieve resilience, and you have several different components about that. And the first one is frame. What do you mean by frame?
Frame is both a process and a meeting where we're looking to answer 4 fundamental questions. And if we step back and we said, what is the purpose of the Bcos? It's to complement leading practice, which I'll just say methodology, and it's to bring better focus and engagement to the problem of resilience. Frame brings focus. It answers 4 questions. It gets leadership together to get on the same page, answering 4 questions. Why are we doing this? Meaning business continuity. What are we trying to protect? What are our key priorities? How much business continuity or how much resilience do we need? That's the 3rd question. And then the 4th is, who needs to participate to make sure we get this right? So in other words, what level of the organization in terms of participation do we need to really take ownership of this? And so the frame meeting or frame process is all about getting an answer to those 4 questions and ensuring that leadership is on the same page. And what it looks like is essentially a meeting where leadership is together, making sure that and encouraging them to debate, get on the same page. But when they leave the room, they're all on that same page with answers to those 4 questions.
It's not a kickoff meeting, right? Because I've heard some people reference that, to have a kickoff awareness session and then talk about what you just talked about. But you define it a lot better, I think, than some of these other definitions that are out there.
It's foundational. We're getting work done in this meeting. We're getting not only are we getting everybody on the same page, we're really setting the direction for the program and the organization when it comes to resilience. Mm-hmm. So it's anything but, let's say I was the one that was facilitating the meeting. It's anything but me talking to a group of executives for 60 or 90 minutes. It's me facilitating them talking to one another, debating, arguing, questioning one another, but eventually getting answers to those 4 questions so that now our program has the fuel, that engine has the fuel to be able to propel us to getting to the right level of resilience.
Yeah, I like that approach, because a lot of times it feels as though these information buy-in sessions are
Mhm.
business continuity professionals showing up with, hat in hand, please support me, support me.
Right.
But in this way, I think it kind of goes back to what you said in the first segment. It gets their buy-in and participation right away.
Right. We want to make it real for them. And we're asking the right questions to be able to get them to realize that I'm not scoping this by saying which locations are in scope or which boxes on the org chart. I'm starting with the big picture. What are the products, services, or business services that we provide to the customer? What happens? What level of pain are we going to experience? What our customers are experiencing? The market's going to experience. We're talking in a language that they're used to talking about in a boardroom setting. The way, we want to get to the point of using that information eventually to measure the success of the program, the way they measure the success of their business.
Good. Your next one, the second point, is process. What do you mean by process?
Process is, many people will say, we have this goal of having a consistent method of execution when it comes to achieving resilience. And so what we're talking about is a process documented, and it's a process followed by all. And so those are the two attributes. In other words, what is the method by which we are going to go ahead and achieve the right level of resilience? And how do I go ahead and package it in a way that's not intimidating, overly complex? So it's, we enable people and we enable everyone to follow it. Because again, if I expect to have completely ad hoc process changing all over the organization, how can I really expect a consistent high quality outcome? And so again, we're setting another foundational element for success.
Just to step off to the side for a moment, how do you define resilience?
What I'd say when I think of resilience, I'm gonna simplify it down to say bend not break. I'm making sure that the organization is positioned to be able to achieve its commitments to all stakeholders. Hopefully, I'm decreasing the frequency of disruption, but I'm also making sure I have a world-class response capability as well. And so that's kind of why I summarize it, bend not break, that Gumby principle, if you will.
So the next one is participation.
Yeah. Participation, and this is where I was saying before, if Bcos is building on methodology and its focus and engagement, this is where engagement starts creeping in. We identified in the frame meeting what is the right level of engagement in the organization to get this right. Participation is saying, well, let's get the right roles defined. What do we need to accomplish? What's the actions that need to be accomplished? But not only that, it's also looking at this through the lens of getting the right people involved too. You mentioned a moment ago when you said kind of people sometimes approach their executives hat in hand, begging for help. I think we in the business continuity profession are one of the few where we'll take anybody that we can get. And that's a bit of a problem in my opinion. We need to not, we just got done getting management's endorsement for the level of participation. We need to define the role, its competencies, what to expect out of people, and we need to get the right people in those roles. And if we don't, we're going to get to this in just a moment, but if we don't, we got to set that as an issue and we got to solve for it.
So that kind of leads us to our next one, engagement.
Mm-hmm. So many people are, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say now, when you're talking engagement, are you talking still about the top team level, or are you talking right through the organization? Everywhere
up and down the organization, wherever if we've got whoever it is that is in the role, the right people in those roles, that's what I'm talking about, engagement. And it could be external to the organization too. One of the things that's interesting, and this is where I go back to saying that we run the program like a business, we can't be afraid to have meetings. Meetings are not a one-way conveying of information. It's meant to be two-way dialogue. We're getting work done in these sessions, and most importantly, we're solving issues, things that are getting in the way of achieving the right level of resilience. And so if I've got the right people and I'm focused on solving issues, it's getting into meetings, the right cadence, the right preparation, demanding the right engagement in those meetings to be able to get work done, and ultimately that means solving issues. And again, the things that are getting in the way of achieving what we identified during the frame meeting.
I agree with you about the meetings. With I also do program and project management. So there's always lots of meetings. If they don't have a set agenda or a reason defined why you're there and what you want to get out of that meeting, then that's when people create, this mindset of meetings. Oh my God, it's overkill. They just go nowhere. We're not doing anything. And it comes down to a structured approach to actually know what you're going into the meeting and what you want to get out of the meeting.
Yeah, and demand, if you've asked people to prepare, demand that they did, and don't be afraid to say, we're not ready to do this right now. Let's go ahead and reconvene when everybody's ready. I mean, it's really getting into the deep end, getting into the fray, and holding people accountable.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned also engagement external. So does this go back to some of the comments you had earlier about the supply chain? Suppliers, wherever they are in that chain.
And this is an overlap also into, I think, a couple of key COVID-19 lessons learned is that when we talk externally, it's actually left and right of our organizations. Maybe we deep down, we're looking at our suppliers and understanding not only who they are and how well they've been prepared and the way in which we've chosen to engage them and structure the relationship. But we also got to look at the customer too. We got to look at what the customer's expectations are. That's common in what people have done with business continuity. But the other part of it is not only what they expect, but also how do we reach them? And not only how do we reach them, but also in different situations, can we expect their behaviors and expectations to change? And there's a lot of really interesting lessons learned that customers might have been fine. We just couldn't reach them because the channel was disrupted because of COVID-19. That's a key lesson learned from many of the organizations that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm. So the next one is an interesting one, measure.
Mm-hmm. So we got done talking about roles, the right people in those roles, and engagement. Well, as part of engagement, we can't really expect that a common set of metrics or a one single scorecard is going to really motivate every single audience. And so if we think about the different types of measurements to be able to understand, are we on track or off track? Do we have an issue? But recognizing that those scorecards and metrics change. So for example, if during the frame meeting, we said, what are we trying to protect? And we were saying we're going to do that based on products and services, because that's how executives and leadership think. We got to have product and service metrics. Sometimes people will call those key risk indicators. Mm-hmm. And we also need to have activity and compliance related metrics. Things like when we talk about process followed by all under process, well, are we following the process? And is that process returning solid outcomes, again, resilience related? And so we might be a little bit lower in the organization. Activity metrics are important. Higher up, those product and service metrics are important. And so identifying the right measurables, packaging them, and using them during excellent forms of engagement are critical.
With measuring, do we run a risk of having audit all of a sudden take over that aspect? Because I've talked with a lot of people, and a lot of times audit, will measure certain things, but from their own end, you have no idea what it is they're really measuring you against.
Right.
So in this case, how would audit get involved? Or do we run the risk of audit taking over?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we have to define audit's role in the program. So it goes back to participation. And I think just like any other role that is performing or not performing, we need to groom them appropriately. For example, when an audit takes place, what are they auditing us based on? Mm-hmm. I'd say first and foremost, it better be a standard that we subscribe to, or that process followed by all that leadership's endorsed. And whatever it is that is our North Star, so to speak, audit should be measuring us based off of that. And so they should almost be a second, third line of defense compared to the measurements that we're doing internally on our own and holding us accountable to those.
Yeah, I've been in situations where audit has announced they will be doing an audit, but you don't know where they got their information from, and you're being all of a sudden held accountable to something you don't even know what it is. Mm-hmm. And they'll write their audit tickets and their audit report and all this and that. So you need to address this, when, you can tell they probably got their information from a Google search.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So
your next one is improvement.
Right. Improvement is made up of three things in the BCOS. It's looking at goals, actions, and experiments. And goals are your longer term, bigger picture efforts that probably can't be done over the course of a couple of weeks. And so think of these as quarterly goals, or maybe it's annual goals. You might even have 3-year goals for your program, and everything gets nested underneath it. Actions are usually the outcomes of some of our smaller issues during engagement. These are the things that we're solving for over the short term, between now and our next meeting, perhaps. And then experiments. We want to create the space for people to try things out. They may fail. They may be, it might be something that, the idea just turns out it won't work, but hopefully we learn something from it. It's a great engagement and buy-in technique. And it's something, again, it's common to how great businesses are run today, is giving employees the latitude to kind of take a risk, try something out, learn from it, and see what we can do with it.
What would be an example of an experiment?
A lot of our clients that are using the BCOS oftentimes are experimenting in different types of strategies to recover. So for example, they might say, hey, we have this critical dependency on this third party. We outsourced something. Maybe instead of depending on the supplier to be able to go ahead and shift to be in case their assets are actually impacted, what if we experimented with an insourcing technique? And we leverage some of the people that have some of these similar experiences that we repurposed elsewhere in the organization when we outsourced. Great idea. Let's try it out and see if it works. Let's test it out. That's a form of an experiment.
Okay. I just want to be clear, because that's not usually a term you hear very much with regards to disasters or business continuity or crises. It's experiment. So
probably not great to experiment in the course of a disruption.
Yeah, not
perhaps in a safe space. You bet.
And the last one is automation.
Yeah. Automation is also something that, when I mentioned in our first session that we delayed the publication of the book a couple times for a couple different reasons, but one of which was, testing and refining and the like. But what we found was that organizations, having a pool of data that can be mined to help identify vulnerabilities, to help identify opportunities, so on and so forth, was critical, because you need that to help prepare, but it's a great information source to help you understand what's next, what if this situation continues. But also we've also seen smaller and smaller numbers of resources available to help us with business continuity. And we want to save those resources to do the more complex tasks, the ones that require human reason. So can I automate workflows? Can I automate administrative tasks? Can I automate keeping current that data source, that data pool? That's what we're getting at with automation, is to be able to go ahead and take those boring, mundane tasks off the plate. And, again, I didn't talk about this in our first session, but one of the motivators for the BCOS wasn't just get to the right level of resilience, but it was also for people that are participating to have a meaningful experience. And if we can go ahead and eliminate those things where I have to do all this boring work that is certainly available to be automated, or that I have the right people on the bus, so to speak, to participate in helping us achieve resilience, that's meaningfulness. And I don't think that we're in a profession where it's too much to ask for a meaningful experience. And I think, we're an important part of an organization's ability to manage risk, and we got to take it seriously, and people need to take us seriously.
And I think on that note, that's a perfect spot to end our second segment. We are talking with Brian Zawada, author of The Business Continuity Operating System. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are talking with Brian Zawada today, author of The Business Continuity Operating System. Brian, you talked about automation. Now, I just want to take that a step further, because I've talked to a lot of people recently about artificial intelligence and automation. And from your experience, have you found that sometimes organizations or practitioners rely too much on an automated system to give them the answers rather than putting in the effort and the work?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of examples where we have this expectation, if you will, that a tool can solve and eliminate the need for, human reasoning. And quite frankly, these types of platforms, they need to be complementary, not a replacement. And, there's so many, finding the best people to participate combined with great information sources, AI, so on and so forth. That's really where the magic happens. It's not an either or. But when we bring all the right resources to solve the problem of resilience together, that's, again, where the magic happens.
I remember working with a gentleman a few years back, because you talked about needing people involved with this, and he said, we can have all the tools and plans in the world. He said, but nothing's going to be good human judgment, making the right calls at the right time based on what you know, rather than utilizing automated systems or even following a plan sometimes.
Yeah, and I think in many ways, I think we've experienced that. I mean, sure, we could have, everyone knows that pandemics happen every so many years, that maybe we were a little bit overdue. But inside of that predicted event, there was so much that was unpredictable. And it requires people that are inherently wired to be able to think at different levels, act and make decisions with incomplete information. Being able to be very analytic, good communicators, good teammates, people that with the ability to look ahead, be a little bit futuristic in terms of their thinking, to anticipate what's next. Not a lot of systems can do all of those things. Mm-hmm. But training and finding the right people and training them and exercising and learning to work together, that's key.
Now we're going to change. Do you have any final thoughts on the business continuity operating system because we're going to jump to a little bit different?
No, I the only thing I just kind of recap on this is that, again, we looked at those 7 attributes of the BCOS. These are what the best programs had in common. And what's interesting, and where programs were stuck or not performing well, they oftentimes were one of the 7 root causes of poor performance. And so, again, if you're looking for something that's a, methodology focused BIA to exercise, that's not what this is. This is that wrapper around methodology that helps bring focus and engagement, ultimately to get to the right level of resilience. That was the objective with the book and ultimately the BCOS.
Great. We're going to change gears, like I said, a little bit here, because a lot of people may not know this, but you actually caught COVID.
I was one of the early adopters.
Well, I don't know if you
didn't want to be, but
yeah, I was going to say. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you went through and how you dealt with it and how you may still be dealing with it?
Yeah, I think it was March of last year. I was over in the UK, whether it be in the UK or while I was flying back. I obviously came across it about 7 to 10 days later. I became, very ill. Pretty much nobody around us had it. I think I was the 30th person in the state of Ohio. So that gives you an idea of confirmed cases. And I was not doing very well for about 10 to 12 days. And thankfully, it never got to the point where I had to go to the hospital and the trouble, the breathing aspect of things. But it was definitely the worst flu feeling I've ever had. And what was interesting was when I got sick, the world was very much open. And when I was cleared to leave my home, whatever that was, I left, and everything. It was a different world out there when I went to the grocery store for the first time. And it was, but it definitely influenced a lot in terms of how I saw it from the perspective of a person going through it as part of an organization, rather than just looking at it through kind of that generic, hey, here's what happens when people get sick. It just, starting to see the firsthand experiences of testing, being cleared, worrying about getting it again, all of those types of things. It definitely made, it was a good perspective, if you will, especially in the profession we're in.
Speaking of profession, has it changed the way you work? Knowing that you went through that, I'm assuming you're not jumping on a plane right now.
Well, but, I have a few colleagues, times. Yeah, I mean, I think it did was, it showed, I think, overall, I mean, the way in which my business was architected, that, we built resilience essentially into this work from anywhere, be able to have multiple different ways in which to engage and work together. So for me personally, once I kind of was cleared to or able to even function, I suppose, it was, I don't think we missed a beat, but it was interesting in that, being able to coach others and understand some of the interactions with healthcare professionals, boards of health. It influenced a lot of the ways in which we coached crisis management teams as their organizations were starting to find people that worked for them or their suppliers that started feeling the effects of this, as well as obviously the disease spread.
I'm assuming you have an office, where with other colleagues that all go in there. Is that going to change anytime in the future? We've done this for over a year working at home. Let's just stay there, or whatever the case. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's been, I think everybody has a different opinion of I'm very comfortable working from home, or I'm not. I can be more efficient in an office or more efficient at home. I'm one that I love to go to the office, and thankfully, I'm able to do that, and still do that. And we've got plenty of social distancing space, and we're following all the rules and doing all the right things. I think inherently we're going to be a more flexible, employer at Castellan in terms of being able to work from home and attract talent from just about anywhere, not where we happen to have a physical office. And I expect that there's going to be a lot of organizations that are going to feel the exact same way. There are pros and cons, of course, getting people together, efficiency, camaraderie, so on and so forth, team building. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch how this all plays out, because there were obviously many organizations early on that said, hey, we're never coming back. And I'm not sure they're going to regret that. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think inherently flexibility is going to be key here. And we're going to see a lot of different ways for people to eventually get together. And it may not be through your traditional office. We'll see.
I like what you said about talent in other areas. And I think that's a way of looking at the current situation as an opportunity.
It is.
If you mentioned in Ohio, so I know Castellan's much bigger than that, but let's just say, you're only in Ohio. So really you're only looking for resources within that state. But with this working from home and the different ways of connecting and interacting, you can now look for talent outside of Ohio, and you can look at, California or even another country.
Yeah, totally.
Which maybe companies wouldn't have even considered before.
Yeah, and it's also it's had so many interesting, both positive and challenging implications. Yes, it opens up the labor pool, but now is a question of comp, all kinds of different HR laws, being able to be more flexible and expansive in that regard. So there's a lot of people are going to have to grow through this, and I think we are nowhere finished with the amount of change in the workplace. Just as more and more people come vaccinated, and we open the world up more than we have over the last 12 months.
You mentioned on that point, there was something interesting I read, or I read it today in an article, I think CNN or something, that restaurants, and it's happening here where I live, they're having difficulty finding staff as they reopen, because those people that couldn't work for a long time took training courses and now are changing careers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now
the workforce has changed. I've even read certain retail establishments, they've had to reduce hours because they can't find people to fully staff. On the same front, other businesses have had to completely change the way in which they engage their customers, because their habits have changed and will do so permanently. So there's a lot of really interesting implications, both on the employment front and the delivery channel front.
Mm-hmm. And some of these, staying with the service industry, there's a university here in the city that I live in. It's a small city, but we have a university here. They usually have a lot of their students working in all the bars and the restaurants. Mm-hmm. Well, when COVID hit, many of them went back home to live with parents and are doing distance learning. So now that a restaurant is opening up here in Guelph, or is able to open up here in Guelph, the people aren't here. is, it's not that they can't find people who want to apply. Physically, the people are no longer here, the ones that they used to rely on.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it adds another challenge to them.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Now, you recently also got your vaccine, and you had an interesting experience with that too.
Yeah, it was funny. I'd heard warnings that those that have had COVID before might have a different experience in the first vaccine compared to those that hadn't had COVID, and maybe they have more of a challenge in the second. And sure enough, both my wife and I had COVID, and both of us were pretty ill for a good 3 days. And we'd heard some people have it for, a little bit of fatigue for a day, or maybe, felt like they had COVID for a day. We had it for like 3 days nonstop. So much so I had to reschedule our discussion together.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like having about a 60% COVID case for 3 days. It was what it felt like. And, I'm still glad that I did that. I had tested recently for antibodies and I was still very high, but doctors still advise, hey, listen, once, a lot of people have needed the vaccine, have had it, get in line, just get towards the back of the line and follow it all the way through, because again, it just adds a degree of protection both for you and society. So we did it, and I'm glad we did. But yeah, still, it was an interesting experience. We definitely got the reaction that you're supposed to have to build immunity.
Well, I guess that's a good thing, even though you felt like crap. It's a good thing you got what was expected.
Yeah, exactly.
And good to hear you and your wife are feeling much better. That's good to hear. Now, we've only got about 2-3 minutes left. Can you take some time and give some final thoughts on business continuity or resilience? And any messages you'd like to convey?
Yeah, it's interesting is that the here we are in the middle of, or hopefully towards the end of COVID-19. We've had a lot of dialogue on lessons learned. There's been some really interesting dialogue that was initially spurred by regulations on the topic of operational resilience, even though organizational resilience and operational risk management, these words are all out there. But there was some really good, timely introduction of content that initially came from the UK regulators in the financial services space that I think are going to have a lasting impact on our profession and address COVID-19. The idea of being able to think about things through the lens, not just of internal pain, but that of the market and customer. Being able to think about impact tolerance, which by the way is very much an overlap with what we did in the frame meeting with Bcos. The idea of thinking about the customer more and the delivery channels, and thinking about plausible scenarios to make it concrete in the minds of executives what business continuity and resilience delivers. Thinking of the end-to-end, which is not just supplier to us, but all the way to the customer and all the channels in between. And being able to truly do end-to-end stress testing and embarking upon that challenge. This reinforces really good practice that isn't just all about, again, building resilience, but it's engaging people at a higher level and hopefully speaking in the language of the executive, which is what we're hearing over and over again. And by the way, it's not just about the financial services sector, it's about all. And all sectors are, thinking about adopting these type of principles because they do address many of the lessons learned from COVID-19. So I'm really excited about that. And I see that as just another chapter, or the journey of the maturation of what we do in our profession.
Yeah, that's the Bank of England Financial Conduct Authority, if I recall correctly, FCA. Yeah. I think that's going to be the new, or the next, whatever you want to call it, Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yeah, in many ways it might. But I'll tell you what, even putting aside regulatory compliance, there's a lot of really good, valuable gems in there that organizations should definitely consider.
Yeah, and if I recall, there's some information in there that really hasn't been touched on before.
Right.
So it's going to be opening up some definitely some new challenges and new doors and opportunities.
Yes, for sure.
So we've come to the end of our show. Brian, thanks very much, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me today.
Hopefully it does well.
Thank you.
Check it out. You can get it from your usual sources, and I believe you can also get it from Castellan as well, if I recall. So thank you very much for sharing your time and your expertise, and glad to hear that you're feeling much better from having COVID and then getting sick again because of the vaccine. So it's good to see you happy, healthy, and in good spirits.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure. And to everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.